You know what it is? I love it.
Okay, I think we spent a lot of time. I think I've unfortunately taken this like kind of chapter of the manual down a weird road. The weird road is we talked a lot about mystery. We talked about sitting in the beatific vision. We talked about all these primal urge problems we have. We've claimed that free will is what we need to solve them. But okay, fine. And then asceticism is just out there as like some part of that solution. And we know we have to have the Holy Spirit move into our hearts. But I don't think I've done anything that's like really practical, right? So let's get like more into a practical vein. Part of that is, all right, how are we going to get into this recollected state? What's like the tools that are like immediately at hand? We said asceticism already, but I want to move away from asceticism for a moment and just talk about like, it is asceticism, but it's kind of different in my mind a little bit. Silence, right? The removing of these distractions and intoxicants, right? This is the like first step to make all this stuff possible, and that's what we're hoping for at Simple House, is to just give people an environment for that. So silence is this removal of distractions and intoxicants. We've all talked about some of the rules of Simple House that foster this silence. No TV, we don't have the radio on publicly, and all these things. But what is the fruit of this recollection? Like, what's the beginning of this? You know, like we've talked about free will a little bit, but there's also this idea that we say all the time, but I'm not sure we know what we're talking about, self-knowledge. Think about how insulting it is to say to somebody, you don't have self-knowledge, you know, but how most of the time that's true. I mean, if somebody told me I didn't have self-knowledge, I'd be like, yeah, there's some areas of my life I don't have self-knowledge. You know, I mean, it's often a very true statement that you don't have self-knowledge. Dostoevsky had this interesting scene, his brother Karamazov's, where a woman from the city who's kind of living this kind of distracted life talks to a monk, and she talks about her problems, and she wants the monk to address this issue that she's putting before him, and he says, stop lying. And she's like, well, how's that an answer? You know, I gave you this whole issue, and he's just like, stop lying. That's all he'll tell her, is just stop lying. And he's kind of just accusing her of, you're lying to yourself, you don't have self-knowledge, you got to stop, you have to get your mind right. She wasn't like telling a lie, because she was coming to him in private for counsel, you know. She wasn't like, in a sense, knowingly lying in that way. She was like lying to herself, right? And that's this accusation of get some self-knowledge. So, what are the benefits of that? Like, what really is self-knowledge? I think that's kind of an interesting question that we don't think about that much. Self-knowledge is part of this idea of like reflecting on these perverted urges we have, figuring out where they're wrong, what type of habit or something can be used to correct it. You know, that's part of your knowledge of yourself and what's going on within you. It's part of what creates... We talked about how these urges deep within you are actually also distorting your mind, right? Self-knowledge is part of what helps us understand that, you know? I always think it's really great when you're with somebody. I'm always really impressed if you're with somebody, and I don't have a good example to give off the top of my head, but they like admit they're not thinking right, you know?
I feel like, well, a lot of people might say like, oh, I'm going to do this at night, and they don't have self-knowledge because they actually can't work at night. But then sometimes someone will say like, okay, I need to sleep on this. Tomorrow morning I'll be able to address the problem or something.
That's a good example. Or like, you know, my wife might get mad at me, and then she'll be like, and I might just be saying this because I'm pregnant or I'm whatever, you know, and it's just like, well, okay, you know, I mean, like, that's a really great statement, you know, that you're not even trusting, the person knows they are not to be trusted even by themselves at that moment, you know. Or somebody could say, get me out of here before I do something I regret. These are like great moments of like self-knowledge shining through. It's like, my mind's not even working the way it's supposed to be, get me out of here. And And this is great. This is part of discernment, right? It's like part of self-knowledge is what's going to help us learn discernment. It's also what's going to help us with this crazy part of discernment I would call discernment of spirits. There's all these different influences on us, right? You don't need any help to do anything wrong, right? There are problems within each of us that we can go do something wrong without any help. There's also the possibility that you can do something wrong because the devil made you do it. And I don't actually mean quotation marks, I mean literally the devil made you do it, or the demon tempted you, or something like that, right? Just as grace comes down, so can temptation come, unfortunately, up and be a problem for us, right? But it's not true to say, I'm always mean to so-and-so because the demons are making me do it. That's just a lie. That's not part of Christian tradition that's necessarily true. You could be always mean to so-and-so because you got a psychological problem. Or you could be always mean to so-and-so because you have this problem with your urges that you've never sorted out or addressed. Yeah, so it's not true that the demons always make you do it, but there's many different reasons why we're tempted to do the wrong thing. But one of the reasons is demons, and that's not to be denied. It might look like something where there's no natural reason for you to want to do that. There's no motivation outside. There's no realistic psychological reason for you to want to do that, but you're all of a sudden overcome with an urge, or not, I wouldn't call it an urge, a temptation to do something wrong, Like
something that may be even atypical for you to be tempted by.
Something you've never done before.
Like if you're tempted by something all the time, it's...
Yeah, probably, yeah. If you have a habit of doing something wrong, it's probably not necessary for a demon to come up here and help it along, But I just wanted to throw that out there that the importance of this is when we are trying to order our lives, to use our free will, to do what's right, being able to discern spirits, being able to know your own problems and who you are and things like this is self-knowledge, and it's immensely valuable to help with discernment and things like this. If you think back in your life, there's probably something you can think of where you've done something, you were convicted that it was the right thing to do at a time, and now in hindsight you're like, oh, well, that was really self-serving, or really that person didn't deserve me lashing out that way. That was more an issue in me than in them. That I was dealing with a lot of anger on that issue, not that what they had done wrong was in any way proportional to what I was dealing with, This is part of growing in self-knowledge, and the more self-knowledge we have, the less we're going to do wrong in this way, right? And the better we're going to be able to make decisions. And this is the beginning of wisdom in a sense, right? It's, I don't want to steal its beginning of wisdom, because fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it is part of wisdom. It's like what starts making wisdom possible. It's also what makes humility possible. And I thought this is interesting that there's a lot of quotes that say, have a true knowledge of yourself, and that's wisdom. And that's humility. Like if you truly know your relationship to everything else around you, that is humility. And I found this I can't remember which saint I was reading who said this, and he said, no. Having a true knowledge of yourself and your relationship to everything around you is just truth. Humility is when you have a true knowledge of yourself and everything around you, and you are willing to, in a sense, step down in solidarity and, help someone or identify with someone who may not even, who needs that type of help. That, I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. But you can't even begin to be humble until you're grounded in this self of knowledge truth.